Hello, fellow pro wrestling fans. My name is John Fredrickson. This is the State of Pro Wrestling Show, the debut, very first show here, Facebook Live tonight. Very special guest back with us once again. In my opinion, a main event anywhere he goes. From Canada, Winnipeg, Canada originally. Here he is, Hotshot Johnny Duggan.
Good evening, sir.
Can you tell us where does that moniker, the Hotshot, come from?
The moniker Hotshot was passed down to me by my trainer, Hotshot Johnny Devine, who's a name some people might be familiar with from his time in TNA Wrestling. He was a part of the original TNA Wrestling crew. He's a former TNA X Division champion. And during a hiatus while he was injured, he spent some time up in Canada getting that free health care and healing himself. He opened up a wrestling school, and I happened to train under him. So while training under him, he would then progress into a different gimmick on television. I believe it was Serotonin at the time. And he had to retire the Hotshot moniker. So at the time, I had moved to Ontario, and I'd followed him there for some training, further training at Scott D'Amore School in Windsor, Ontario. So I was traveling with him, doing some independence. So he bestowed upon me the Hotshot moniker as he was retiring it and moving on to different things with his career. And ironically enough, I've now been using it for, going on 16 years, was much longer than he ever actually used it originally. So we're still going strong with it, but that's how it all came to be, and it kind of stuck, and that's kind of who I am.
Awesome, man. I love it. Any thoughts on the Hot Shots movie series from the 90s?
It's good stuff, man. I haven't watched it in probably a good 10 plus years, so I'm probably not up to date on how good it is, but I recall it being good then, and my sense of humor has increased since then, so I'd probably enjoy it even more so now in today's fragile little social world.
Certainly. I want to thank all the fans for joining us, tuning in to the debut show, State of Pro Wrestling Show, the live stream here on Facebook. Got the exclusive with Hotshot Johnny Duggan. Let's get serious for a minute. The last time we spoke was on the State of Pro Wrestling podcast last spring, and things were pretty well shut down already up in Canada, and you hear the frustrations in the live stream. We'll throw the links below later so fans can dive into that if they'd like. Can you kind of catch us up on what you've been up to since last spring?
Since last spring, so that would have been March 2021. I'll have to go back and listen to that to myself to see how I've progressed in my frustrations since March 2021. Well, how things have progressed and how they've changed. Well, they progressed and changed so much that I packed my bags and I left Canada. That's how bad things have gotten there, and they continue to be. As somebody who has been an event promoter, now going on 13 years with Canadian Wrestling's Elite, it's now going on 3 years. We have not been able to produce live events in front of a sufficient, large enough audience, especially on a touring scale, to provide an income for ourselves, whether that be me as a promoter or as a pro wrestler, or for any of my wrestlers to do so with no end in sight. For a big part of 2 years, things were locked down completely, where no gatherings indoors were allowed to any capacity. So we were just completely shut out from being able to make a living. Then it opened up a little bit, but you were allowed a maximum capacity of 100 fans in the building, which is something, but it definitely isn't enough when you're trying to run something on the scale we were with Canadian Wrestling's Elite, or when you're trying to put food on the table for your family, for a matter of fact. And now we're back in the same boat up in Canada. Things locked down again. Gatherings not allowed in a lot of places, and in the places they are allowed, it's a political and controversial topic, but now vax passes are pretty much mandatory across the entire country of Canada to enter any indoor facility space outside of a grocery store, and that includes professional wrestling events, which is something that I don't condone and participate in, which halted our business a little bit as well, but has also completely slashed the business in half for the companies that have decided to go ahead and run under those conditions in Canada, who are drawing lower numbers with the ability to run at full capacity with the vax mandate passport, than companies that were running at a limited capacity when anybody could come in, because people are so split on the issue and not supporting it. It's really actually a double-edged sword. You have the people, when you do that kind of business, you've cut out the fans that want to support you, that don't agree with vax passes, who are not able to come now. And then you still have people that can come, but are still very much buying into, I want to be safe and stay home. I've got my vaccine, I've got my shots, but it's probably best just to stay at home and play it cool for now. And they're not coming out. So it's really just hit the business on both ends, affecting everybody who want to come out and enjoy a professional wrestling event. So even though you can operate to some capacity, the conditions are still not warranted to do it enough where you're going to be able to make a living. So me and my family kind of had to make a decision, as my wife runs her own independent company as well, outside of wrestling, not her own independent wrestling company, but her own side business that's very dependent on live crowds and live audiences. So we were both just crippled to a point where after a year and a half of living off of our savings and just trying to scratch by, hoping there would be a light at the end of the tunnel, realizing there isn't one. And if there is, it's not for a long time to come yet. We had to make a big change and, opted to pack up our family and move down south where there are no restrictions in the area we're living in, which we're quite enjoying, as it's a complete culture shock from what we've been living in the last 2 years in Canada. But just trying to start our lives over again and just have a legit opportunity to provide for ourselves with an honest living, which we weren't able to do so back home.
Certainly, yeah. Things have been really chaotic everywhere, trying to deal with everything going on. Can you tell us about your travels since you arrived here in the States?
Yeah, they started off a little bit slow, but they're starting to pick up. I came down here at the beginning of November, so we fled the country. Essentially, we escaped the country. We jumped the border, and we came down here in November. And we stayed with a good friend of mine who was on our podcast originally, Jimmy Jacobs. I stayed with him down in Arizona, which was a nice escape coming from Canada. Let me tell you, I've never lived somewhere, even though it was only for 3 weeks. I'd never been based out of somewhere where at 10 in the morning, it was as hot as it was in a Canadian summer in the middle of November, the way it was. It was amazing. And now I understand why people retired to the desert, because it was a nice treasure to be a part of. So we got there so we can get into the country, get situated. Now we're living up in Wisconsin. Now that I'm settled and we're getting life figured out, we're getting back on the road and doing some wrestling. About a month ago, I did my first trip down in the Tennessee, Kentucky area. We did a 5-day loop hitting up Ohio Valley Wrestling, three events for Pro Wrestling Mid-South in Tennessee, and then also did my first ever event with the School of Morton, which was a lot of fun. And now we're getting ready to keep on going. I just did my first event about 3-4 hours away in Wisconsin this past weekend. And then coming up in February, we got all kinds of stuff from, right here in Wisconsin to West Virginia down to Arkansas. And it just keeps on picking up and it keeps on rolling. And more promoters are getting in contact with me. I'm getting in more contact with more promoters. And we're hoping to get that full-time schedule that I once had before things closed down. Because anybody who is familiar with myself and my work ethic, so to speak, prior to the COVID shutdown and the border shutdown, you may as well, close your eyes and pick a spot and point on the map, because I could be anywhere on any given weekend. And that's kind of the way I like it. I like to be on the road, traveling to different cities, wrestling different places, wrestling new wrestlers, as many days of the month as I can physically fit into a schedule. So I'm really hopeful that we can get back to it, and it's slowly coming together that way. So now I just got to cross my fingers and hope my body holds up all these years later from all this time off.
All right, fans, I want to thank you for tuning in tonight. State of Pro Wrestling Show Live. Our very first featured guest here, Hotshot Danny Duggan. We're going to go to the commercial break, and we'll be back.